members. Thought it was still morning, and welcome to the Ad Hoc on COVID-19 Recovery and Neighborhood Investment Committee. Today is Wednesday, August 19th. We'll be taking public comment prior to discussing today's agenda items. So, Mr. Clerk, can you go ahead and please explain, or why don't we'll take roll call first, and then we'll have you read out the call-in information.
Certainly, Madam Chair. Councilmember Nuri Martinez.
Here.
Councilmember Herb Wesson.
Here.
Councilmember Curran Price.
Here.
Councilmember Gil Cedillo. Councilmember Gil Cedillo. Councilmember Mitch O'Farrell.
I'm present.
You have a quorum, Madam Chair.
Mr. Cedillo, just to, is
Presente.
there he is. Okay. All right, so we have a quorum. So why don't we go ahead, Mr. Clerk, and read out the call-in number for the members of the public.
Certainly, Madam Chair. The audio for this meeting is broadcast live on the internet at lacd.org. The live audio can also be heard at 213-621-CITY. Members of the public who would like to offer public comment on the items listed on the agenda should call 669-254-5252. Again, the number is 669-254-5252, and the user meeting ID number is 160-535-8466. Again, it's 160-535-8466. Then press pound. Press pound again when prompted for participant ID. Once admitted into the meeting, press star 9 to request to speak.
Mr. Clerk, Mr. City Attorney, can you explain the speaking rules, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. To members of the public calling in, when it's your turn to speak, please state which of the agenda items you'd like to speak on. You have 1 minute per item to speak, up to 2 minutes total. Because this is a special meeting, there is no general public comment. You may only comment on the agenda items. We will tell you when your time is up. When speaking on the agenda items, you must be on topic. Our goal is to get through as many speakers as we can. If you're not speaking on topic, or if we can't tell whether you're speaking on an agenda item, you will get one brief warning from me or the chairwoman. If you do not immediately get clearly on topic or again stray off topic, the chairwoman will cut you off and you will forfeit the rest of your speaking time, and we'll move on to the next speaker. We will take 20 minutes total of public comment. Finally, for members of the public calling in to speak, as soon as you hear someone address you, you are live in the committee meeting. If you're also listening to the committee meeting on your computer, channel 35, or other device, please turn down the volume on those devices immediately. There's a several second time delay between the live meeting and the broadcast, and if you're listening on your devices, it's going to cause a lot of confusion. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
All right, thank you. We're going to take public comment. I just want to explain as well. You get 1 minute for an item for a maximum of 2. We do not take general public comment during this committee. You have to speak directly to an agendized item on today's agenda. So let's go ahead and take the first speaker.
Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Hi, my name's Elizabeth Eastland. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. What item?
Hi.
Hi, what item do you want to speak on?
I'm speaking on agenda item number 6, HSID's request to provide funding for the Project Safe Haven program.
Very well. You have 1 minute. Go ahead.
Thank you. As I stated, my name is Elizabeth Eastland. I'm the chair of the city's Domestic Violence Alliance and the executive director of Rainbow Services. Since the Project Safe Haven began, we've served over 50 households through the program, and we continue to provide support to families who have exited the program through rental support and supportive services to those who were able to identify safe permanent housing. We continue to support 17 households currently, which is actually 3 times more than we're able to serve, the number of households we're able to serve in our emergency shelter. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we've seen a huge increase in calls to our hotline with survivors seeking shelter and support services. So I really urge the committee to approve this request to be able to extend the program through December for now. And as you've reviewed in the report, this program has increased the capacity of DV organizations to serve additional survivors during this time.
Thank you, Speaker. Your time is up. Thank you for calling. Next speaker.
Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Hi, yes. This is Rabia Sen with Esperanza Community Housing. I'm speaking to items 3 and 5. In order to ensure a true just recovery for all our communities, particularly Black and Brown communities who've been hardest hit by this pandemic, we need to see meaningful investment in affordable housing acquisition and rehab, street vending, and the Paycheck Protection Program. On housing investments, we need a neighborhood investment program to protect the health of tens of thousands of vulnerable residents. So what we're asking you to do is to follow up on your actions of June 16th to fund a neighborhood investment strategy to stabilize the housing of low-income, elderly, and health-compromised tenants, address overcrowded conditions, and to keep low and moderate-income homeowners in their homes. On street vending, we're asking you to please follow up on Council Members Cedillo's and Rodriguez's motion to allocate $5 million for street vendor equipment to support them in complying with DPH's regulations and COVID protocols. We really cannot afford to leave anyone behind. We really need this. And on the Paycheck Protection Program, Los Angeles must do the right thing by its workers and small businesses by utilizing the CARES Act money in a way that provides direct relief and not through a lottery system. Because LA is the wage theft capital of the U.S., a program offering financial support to small businesses must target employers with sound labor practices. An improved PPP program should deprioritize businesses where workers have filled wage theft claims and require that employers use funds to retain their existing workforce. Again, these three pieces are key parts of whatever would be a just recovery program and are what we expect as Angelenos, will be some of the uses of the CARES Act funding. Again, we cannot afford to leave our most vulnerable communities behind. And these three components will help ensure that we do not. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Hello, this is Kay Buck from the Coalition to Abolish Slavery and Trafficking, and I'm speaking on item number 6.
Okay, you have 1 minute. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and committee members. As I stated, I am with the Coalition to Abolish Slavery and Trafficking. I did submit a one-page statistical report on all of the human trafficking survivors that we have been able to serve because of the funding through Project Safe Haven. And I want to thank the committee for that support. I want to say that in my 17 years of leading CAST, I've never experienced this kind of urgency and intensity in our community. When the shelter-in-place order started, we knew that there would be a surge in human trafficking and survivors fleeing to us for safety and services, and our predictions came true. Since the pandemic began, we have served more than double the number of victims in the same time last year. We are spending 230% more time on emergency services than this time last year. And in the first half of this year, 72% of the victims who called our 24-hour hotline said they were homeless, up from 60% last year. I can't
Speaker, your time is up. Do you want to just wrap up?
I will. So we have provided 98% of the victims we responded to with immediate emergency housing. That includes 20 families and 30 children. Thank you so much for your support, and I hope that funding will be extended. Thank you.
very much. Thank you for calling. We'll take the next speaker.
Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Yeah, Rob Kwan, I'd like to speak on items 1 and 6.
You have 2 minutes, Rob. Go ahead.
I was kind of shocked to read this report in item 1 and see that Project Roomkey is planning for a ramp down that could happen as soon as September, December, and it's notable that we haven't even hit a third of our goal of securing 15,000 rooms. There's been no hearing on the motion to commandeer hotels to expedite that. The report also showed hundreds of millions in new COVID spending. County, state, federal funds are only offering so much to cover the tab, and that leaves at least $163 million in spending we need to absorb. And as you all know, that doesn't include the lost revenue, which is already looking at a hundreds of million dollar range. And that was all before we botched our reopening and rushed to reopen. So that situation is just getting worse. Just to give you an example, the LA Zoo being shut down for 3 months required a $15 million allocation from the mayor to help make up for that. So $15 million or more, I'm assuming, for another 3 months of shutdown. Austin defunded $150 million from their police force, roughly a third of their PD's budget. The math here, it points to you needing to do more. So I think that's the direction we need to go in to actually make up for the shortfall. I want to also uplift the work of our service providers regarding item 6, all the work they're doing for our immigrant community under COVID at the border here in LA. People have an increased risk being in deportation proceedings, puts a strain on attorneys, and I think it's absolutely disgusting to see the feckless leadership of Councilmember Cedillo result in them being strung along for months and months to sort out the justice fund. Fix your shit. Thank you. Yield my time.
Thanks, Rob. Next speaker.
Please state your name and the
Hi.
item you'd like to speak on.
Hi, this is Tamara Brown, and I'd like to speak on item number 3.
Go ahead.
I'm the executive.
You
I'm
have
the
1 minute.
executive. I'm the executive director of the Mount Washington Preschool and Child Care Center. Mount Washington is a 29-year nonprofit organization that oversees 3 licensed child care centers, including Joy Picus, which is located in the LA City Hall South, Harry Pregerson, located in the Roy Ball Federal Building, and La Casita Verde, which is in the historic Ziegler Estate in Highland Park. Mount Washington wholeheartedly supports item number 3 as it relates to a $10 million child care relief and recovery program. Due to COVID restrictions, we had to decrease our rooms by 50%. However, we are fully enrolled in just about every room and have a very long waiting list. Also, due to COVID restrictions, we have maintained our staffing levels and our overhead remains consistent. The reality is that we are running a $25,000 deficit every month, and this is just not sustainable. We have exhausted our PPP and have used our reserve to keep our doors open. We stand committed to supporting our families and our teachers, and this child care relief and recovery grant would allow us to do that.
Thank you, Speaker. Your time is up. Thank you for calling.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Hi,
Hello.
my name is Laura Gracia, and I'm speaking on items 2 and 5.
2 and 5?
Yeah.
Okay, you have 2 minutes
So
to speak on both items. Go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon, council members. I'm with Communities for a Better Environment, and we organize in the Harbor area and the Southeast LA cities. I'm calling to urge the council to invest CARES funding in 3 areas: acquisition, rehab, street vending, and an LAPPC program. We need a just recovery from this pandemic that prioritizes low-income Black, Indigenous, and Brown folks, and the best way to do that is by investing in the sustainable future of housing and business. I'm asking the committee to take the next steps on your actions during your June 16th meeting to fund a neighborhood investment strategy that will stabilize the housing of low-income, elderly, and health-compromised tenants, address overcrowded conditions for essential workers that exacerbates the spread of COVID-19, and to keep low and moderate-income homeowners in their homes. It's imperative to house unhoused and keep people housed because the pandemic might slow down and can be contained, but climate impacts will continue to impact everyone, and especially Black, Indigenous, and Brown folks the hardest. With $100 million neighborhood investment of CARES Act funding, $77.5 million of CRF, and $32 million of supplemental CDBG, our plan can assist over 6,500 lower-income homeowners through homeownership and foreclosure counseling and mortgage relief. Another 75,000 tenants will receive eviction defense services, and we can secure 160 homes and 10 distressed commercial sites to counter displacement and create long-term community and family assets. This neighborhood investment program will protect the health of tens of thousands of vulnerable residents while also countering takeover of our neighborhoods by corporate investors and predatory lenders who have no vested interest in the long-term stability of our communities. Just strongly urge you all to keep those three areas in mind: acquisition, rehab, street vending, and an LAPPP program. It's necessary to recover from COVID while also instating solutions that will go beyond and will also impact climate, and will also be impacted by climate. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for calling. Next speaker.
Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Hi, my name is Rudy Espinoza, and I'd like to speak on item 3 and item 6.
You have 2 minutes to speak on both. Go ahead.
Council President Martinez, thank you so much for hosting this important committee meeting. I wanted to highlight something on 2 things on item 3. The first is I wanted to encourage the committee to hear and discuss Councilman Sevilla and Councilwoman Rodriguez's motion, an idea of investing $5 million in infrastructure to support street vendors. Street vendors have to pay upwards of $30,000 for carts, and it's extremely cost prohibitive, and that idea can really help us develop a prototype cart that could formalize street vendors and help them get permits. So it's a great down payment for the future of our economy. The second is the wage protection program that Councilman Ryu brought up recently in this past week. It's a great opportunity to support small businesses. As a micro lender, many businesses are struggling to get capital and also to keep their workers on the job. And I just want to encourage the committee to hear that idea. And then lastly, on item 6, as H did and your team really works on figuring out how to keep people housed, there's an important opportunity to make sure that land and buildings stay in the hand of community members. And so whatever you can do to support community land trusts and work with housing developers that have a lot of expertise in doing this, I think we should do it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
My name is Laura Raymond. I'm speaking on items 3 and 5.
You have 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Laura Raymond. I'm the director of ACT LA, and I'm calling today to urge this body to do everything in its power to set LA on a path to a just recovery. And this would mean utilizing strategies to build community assets rather than strategies that would bring additional debt to struggling Angelenos. Specifically, we're urging the committee to take the next step on the motion put forward by Councilmember Wesson in June to fund a neighborhood investment strategy that will stabilize renters and homeowners that are at risk of losing their homes or in overcrowded conditions. As other organizations have noted, with this $100 million neighborhood investment of CARES Act funding, $77.5 million of CRF and $32 million of supplemental CDBG, we can secure 160 homes and 10 distressed commercial sites to counter displacement and create long-term community and family assets. And we can counsel tens of thousands of renters and homeowners to enable them to keep their homes. Regarding item 3, we also urge $5 million to provide urgently needed carts for street vendors, and this would follow the June motion by Councilmembers Cedillo and Rodriguez. Lastly, we urge CARES allocations to the Angeleno Paycheck Protection Program, introduced last week by Councilmember Ryu and seconded by Councilmember Vizcaino, designing a program specific to the needs of corner markets, mom-and-pop restaurants, street vendors, and other small businesses will mean the success of local economies across LA. And we should, of course, focus on businesses with good labor practices in order to protect workers. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for calling. Just go ahead and take the next speaker.
Please state your name and the items you'd like to speak on.
Zachary Warma in support of item number 6.
Go ahead. You have 1 minute to speak on item number 6.
Thank you, Council President, and good afternoon, Council members. Zachary Warma, Public Affairs at Downtown Women's Center here On behalf of DWC, I'm calling today to lend our full support for item number 6, the continuation of Project Safe Haven to support domestic violence and intimate partner violence survivors during the safer at home orders and the pandemic-related shutdown. As you well know, survivors and their families have not been safer at home during the pandemic, as increased incidents of domestic violence have been reported here in Los Angeles and across the county. Per HCID's August 14th report, as a result of the pandemic and the lack of turnover, 80 to 90 women were being turned away each week from DV shelters. Project Safe Haven has been a critical support line in supporting survivors. In absence of its continuation, nearly 1,200 survivors will be deprived of safety and security. So we ask and urge your support for the continuation of Project Safe Haven through the year and the increased city support for domestic violence survivors. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Hi, my name is Fanny Ortiz, and I'm speaking on item 5 and 3. My organization is Fideicomiso Comunitario Tierra Libre, and I am the co-president. We have been working actively in building partnerships between community land trusts and mission-driven housing developers, and also tenants who are at risk of displacement, to acquire and hold properties as affordable in perpetuity in the model of tenants in common. As we are in the process of acquiring land to do this. And as part of the $100 million neighborhood investment request, we ask that you devote $28 million of CRP and supplemental CDBG funds to accomplish our proposed demonstration project to acquire and rehab a total of 100 apartments where low-income, elderly, and health-compromised tenants are at immediate risk of losing housing, and to provide housing for essential workers who are currently living in an overcrowded housing conditions that compromises the health of themselves and their families. Through our land stewardship and tenant ownership model, a one-time subsidy from the city can result in protecting the current high-risk families from being displaced, and also provide all future generations of families with affordable, stable, and healthy housing. The final supplement allocation of CDBG funds to arrive from Washington, D.C. before the end of 2020. And an unknown but significant amount could also be committed to a long-term community ownership strategy that will protect our neighborhoods from a new round of displacement pressures. And I also urge the city to live up to their promise of investing in street vendors. The city needs to allocate $5 million of COVID relief funds to support street vendors in acquiring the equipment necessary to comply with health requirements. Support the street vendors because we cannot afford to leave anyone behind. Thank you.
Thank you for calling. We're going to go ahead and take the next speaker.
Please state your name and the items you'd like to speak on.
Hola, mi nombre es Pedro Varillas.
Un momentito, ¿tiene traductor con usted?
No.
Ok, ¿cuál es el
tema?
¿Cuál es el tema que quiere, no, en la agenda, cuál del tema quiere hablar? Hay 7 temas en la agenda esta tarde, ¿cuál de ellos quiere hablar?
Es comentario general.
No tomamos comentario general en este comité. Tiene que hablar sobre uno de los temas que estamos hablando hoy.
Ok, porque es del distrito 6 de Cal Valle.
¿Cuál de los temas de la agenda quiere usted hablar? Hay 7.
Sobre los vendedores ambulantes.
Pero ese no es uno de los temas en la agenda de esta tarde. ¿No sabe qué otro tema? Hay 7 temas en la agenda. ¿Cuál de ellas quiere usted hablar? Members, there is a speaker that wants to speak for general public comment. We don't take general public comment in a special meeting. So I'm asking what items would he like to speak on the agenda. Señor, ¿todavía está ahí? ¿Aló?
Please state your name and the items you'd like to speak on.
My name is Brady Collins, items 2 and 3.
Okay, you have 1 minute for each. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm the Koreatown Immigrant Workers Alliance, or KIWA. Since 1992, KIWA has organized and built power for low-wage workers, and we've seen firsthand that the hardest hit groups during the pandemic are our immigrant and Black neighbors. Achieving a just recovery from this crisis requires that we support those that need it most, which means investing in support for small businesses that are Black and ethnic minority owned and supporting their workers. 90% of small businesses owned by people of color were left out of the federal Paycheck Protection Program, and much of it went to businesses with under 500 full-time employees, whereas 93% of businesses in LA have less than 20. Only those who had existing banking relationships as well had a chance of getting any of this needed money. We have an opportunity to right the wrongs of the federal program and provide much needed and deserved relief to both small businesses and their workers. The motion put forward by Councilmember Rue and seconded by Councilmember Buscaino will do just that. We must design a PPP program specific to the needs of LA's corner markets, mom and pop restaurants, and street vendors, and provide direct relief rather than rely on the lottery system. And because LA is the wage theft capital of the United States, a program offering financial support to small businesses must target employers with sound labor practices. An improved PPP program should deprioritize businesses where workers have filed wage theft claims and require that employers use funds to retain their existing workforce. Thank you. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Speaker. Just go ahead and take, members, we're going to take another 10 minutes of public comment, and then we can get onto our agenda. Let's go ahead and take the next speaker.
Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Hi, yes, my name is Savannah Walker. I would like to speak on item number 5.
Item number 5, go ahead. You have 1 minute.
Yeah, I would just like to mirror the comments that were made earlier in holding the council accountable for the comments that they made on June 16th, meeting neighborhood investment strategy that will stabilize the housing of low-income, elderly, and health-compromised tenants, address overcrowded conditions for essential workers that exacerbates the spread of COVID, and to keep low to moderate income homeowners in their homes. With $100 million neighborhood investment of the CARES Act funding, groups like NHS will assist over 6,500 low-income homeowners through home ownership and foreclosure counseling and mortgage relief. Another 5,000 tenants will receive homebuyer education and counseling, and we can acquire 160 homes and 10 distressed commercial sites that are currently at risk of causing unsafe health conditions for families.
Thank you, Speaker.
Again, my name is...
Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Yeah, my name is Roberto. I'm speaking on item number 5. And I'm part of Fideicomiso Comunitario Tierra Libre, a community land trust here in Boyle Heights in East LA. And the population we serve is at risk of displacement, not only because of people not being able to work, but because a lot of buildings are potentially going to fall into distress. And so as part of the 100 million neighborhood investment request, we ask you to devote 28 million of CRF and supplemental CDBG funds to accomplish our proposed demonstration project to acquire and rehab a total of 100 apartments where low-income, elderly, and health-compromised tenants are at immediate risk of losing housing, and to provide housing for essential workers who are currently living in overcrowded housing conditions that compromise the health of themselves and their families. So we urge you to invest and prevent people from getting in worse health conditions and being displaced. Thank you.
Thank you for calling. Let's take the next speaker.
Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Hi, this is Joe Donlin. I'd like to speak on items number 3 and 5.
Okay, you have 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Council President Martinez, for hosting these important convenings. My name is Joe Donlin with Strategic Actions for a Just Economy. We work with tenants who are deeply impacted by the current eviction and rent debt crisis and by its intersection with this deadly global pandemic. And we want to see a just recovery in LA like we all do, and we want to make sure that CARES funding provides relief as opposed to more debt. We need just recovery. As we know, the hardest hit communities are Black and Brown communities, and investing in the sustainable future of housing and business is the way to an equitable recovery. We're asking for investment in at least 3 areas: long-term acquisition and rehab to keep housing in communities' hands and at deep affordability levels, supporting street vendors, and supporting the local small business PPP program, in addition to all efforts to address the tremendous rent burden that are affecting tenants today. Specifically, we want to reach back to that Councilmember Wesson motion from June on neighborhood investment strategy and focus in on how we can invest in upwards of $100 million to support the acquisition goals, supporting both renters and homeowners and preventing foreclosures. We also put forward a set of proposals that would include within that $100 million proposal a right to counsel and resources to make sure that eviction defense services reach tens of thousands of tenants. And when it comes to item number 3, want to echo the calls in support of street vendors and putting forth at least $5 million for street vending equipment as critical members of our community. We know many are undocumented.
Thank you, Speaker.
Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Hi, this is Stephanie Mullen with Strength United, speaking on item number 6.
Hi, you have 1 minute. Go ahead.
Thank you, Councilmember Martinez, and thank you for holding this special meeting. As a service provider with Strength United, providing wraparound service to victims of violent crime, mainly domestic violence, sexual assault, and child maltreatment survivors, we have found that our new clients have increased vulnerability and more intense needs. Through Project Safe Haven, Strength United has supported 37 adults and 27 children, and many of our occupants were pregnant when they entered emergency housing and now have newborns to support during this trying time. So we encourage the committee to support the expansion of Project Safe Haven, and if you're able, help to identify other resources like emergency transportation and clothing and food that we can help to provide to our clients. We're working to identify those ourselves as well. And thank you for your support of survivors and the service providers who are doing this field work. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and take another speaker, and this will be our last speaker.
Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Hello? Speaker, are you there?
Hola, buenas tardes.
¿Aló?
Sí, buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes. ¿Tiene traductor?
Mi nombre es...
¿Tiene traductor?
No tengo traductor.
Ok, ¿qué artículo de la agenda quiere usted hablar hoy?
El tema número 3, por favor.
¿El número 3?
Sí.
Ok. Empiece, yo le voy a traducir.
Ok. Mi nombre es Claudia Moreno.
My name is Claudia Moreno.
Soy vendedora ambulante.
I am a street vendor.
Somos vendedores que necesitamos ayuda y su apoyo.
We need support and we need help.
Por favor, adopten la moción que se introdujo en junio.
Please adopt the motion that was introduced in June.
$5 millones de dinero federal.
$5 million designated for street vendors.
Para ayuda de nosotros.
For assistance to us.
Queremos vender legalmente. Tenemos 10 años luchando por nuestros permisos.
We have been fighting for this cause for over 10 years,
y no tenemos el equipo adecuado.
and we don't have the adequate equipment.
No hemos trabajado, no tenemos dinero
We haven't worked, and we don't have any money
para pagar nuestras rentas.
to be able to pay for our rent. Por favor, ya se le terminó el tiempo. ¿Qué más quiere agregar?
Ok, que necesitamos todo su apoyo, por favor.
We need all of your support. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias por llamar.
Gracias.
I hope my translation was pretty good, right? Okay, that concludes public comment for today's meeting. We're going to go ahead and close public comment, members. We'll take items 7 through 9 on consent unless anyone has any comments or questions.
So moved.
Thank you very much. So without objection, those items will be approved on consent, items 7 through 9. Let's move on to item number 1. The CEO staff is here to briefly go over the report, and I believe Mr. Matt Zaber is also here from the mayor's office to answer any questions. So why don't we get started with Ms. Huber from the CAO's office? And Mr. Zaber, if you can please come to the table. You want to just give us a brief overview of the report? Why don't you go ahead and start, Patty?
Good afternoon, Patty Huber from the CAO. The report in front of you is an update to a report that we issued earlier in June. In this report, we are now showing that our June 30th expenditures are approximately $277 million for the various response categories as outlined in the attachment 1. It is relatively close to the amount that we had projected in our previous report of $256 million, and it just represents the costs that have been reported to date. As we project through December 31st, that has gone up significantly from our earlier report. We are now looking at approximately $1.3 billion as compared to $548 million. The biggest driver of the increase is the addition of the homelessness response roadmap expenditures of approximately $540 million. That number probably includes some future year costs, but that is going to be a significant endeavor for us in the, it also represents a full year cost, not just through December. I did not have data to break it out only through December. Some other factors that led to the increase is that we have started our contact tracing program. The expenditures for that are in the direct salary category and the DSW, both for direct salaries and overtime. That has been an effort that had not really started in our as of June, but has ramped up over time and will continue well into the calendar year. Overall, we are looking at a general fund impact of approximately $163 million. This is assuming that things continue forward as projected. We do note that the project room key is one area of uncertainty, and that could be significantly higher, because while those efforts are ramping down as we transition into the homelessness roadmap, we are in fact going to be keeping people in their current situations until we can transition them into another housing solution. So it is possible that those expenditures will be greater than currently projected. In addition, just for tracking purposes, we provided a chart that shows the allocations of the coronavirus relief funds provided through the CARES Act. For to date, Council has taken action to allocate $433 million of the almost $700 million that we received, leaving a balance of $262 million. We did include a section showing just the items that are pending before committee today, just to give you a sense of what the remaining balance would be if those items were approved. I would note, we do know there are a significant number of other motions pending before committee for other areas of allocation. We did not include them in the chart only because they're still under evaluation, and we can't say whether or not all of those motions represent feasible or eligible activities. And so we only summarized the things that we knew sort of were moving forward as of this point. And I'm available for any questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Zabel. Do you want to add anything else?
Nothing to add, just happy to answer any questions about the programs, should members have them.
Let me go ahead and kick it off. Have we received any reimbursement from FEMA yet?
We have not. As noted in our report, we submitted 3 projects for expedited funding. They have now all been obligated. In order to receive reimbursement, we now have to put together a package of documented expenditures, and that includes invoices and payroll timesheets and so on, and our office is working busily to get all of those done and submitted. So we would expect some reimbursement for those 3 projects in the early fall timeframe.
So is there any indication that they're going to be able to approve that something soon?
Those projects have been approved as projects. They meet the criteria to be FEMA reimbursed. Now we need to submit the reimbursement request. And the expedited funding, just for clarification, FEMA only reimburses up to 75% of actual expenditures. The expedited program only provides us a portion of the 75%. So as outlined in the chart, we could get up to $34 million in expedited funding. And again, we're busily working to get those reimbursements submitted to the state now that these have been obligated. But as you can see, the obligations only came, some of them only came in July.
Okay. And can I get a quick update as to the testing from the mayor's office? Is Curative covering the cost of the testing? And what is the city on the hook for when it comes to testing?
So as it relates to the test that Curative, well, I'll start from the beginning. We have, since March 20th, the city has issued over 1.1 million tests, an average of 12,360 tests a day. We have been, since the last time this committee was held, been in negotiations with Curative and another company that's providing tests to our skilled nursing facilities to memorialize their commitment to funding the tests moving forward. The start date of their commitment is June 24th, and our hope is to secure very quickly an agreement that would limit the city's liability moving forward between the 24th of June through December 31st to only cover those tests that are unable to be reimbursed by insurance or by the federal government should there be no insurance. We also are negotiating an upper limit to that obligation so that so Curative would front fund all of the tests. They would then bill the insurance from the individuals, and then only after they had been unsuccessful in getting reimbursed from insurance or from the federal government, from HHS, then they would send the city a bill. And we're also negotiating an upper limit to the total amount that we could be on the hook for. What we're looking at, I think I could say this, is no more than $30 million, of which that would all be FEMA reimbursable as well. So we would be looking at an end-of-the-day cost potentially of no more than $8.25 million for what we estimate to be 2.3 million tests, which we would issue from June 25th through December 31st of this year.
So if I understand you correctly, then we would be in the hook for about $8 million.
After FEMA reimbursement, the city would be on the hook. The city or CARES Act would be on the hook for less than $10 million, 8.25.
So my last question before I turn it to Mr. O'Farrell, because I know he has questions as well. So how are COVID-19 expenditures being tracked? Patty, are you conducting regular meetings with the mayor's office to monitor the activity? How is that taking place?
So yes, I have regular communications with the mayor's office. You know, they're tracking the projects which are represented here in the large part using their, you know, talking with departments and so on. We are also gathering data from the departments directly for the FEMA component. That always makes this particular report a little challenging only because it's two very different data sets talking about similar activities and gathered in slightly different ways. But I have really good communication with Kiana in the mayor's office, who is super helpful in sort of us all being on the same page.
Okay. Mr. O'Farrell, did you have any questions, sir?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and Patty and Matt, thank you so much for your report. I'm really glad that we have a little more clarity in terms of what our starting total is, what we've allocated with a remaining balance. And within that, of course, it's much more complex, Patty, as you just described, and we really appreciate that. I think what we need for our purposes as a council, as a committee, and as a council is we know that we're going to over ask for programs and resources to help folks who are experiencing extreme hardships, including homelessness. We're going to oversubscribe this limited amount of remaining funding, no doubt. So it helps us, and these requests are going to come from the mayor's office and then from ourselves, to be put in a big bucket so that we can actually have a conversation and or a debate about priorities on how to expend remaining funding. And I look forward to that conversation, and that will be us, you know, doing our diligence on priorities for how to allocate those funds due to COVID-19. So I appreciate that. And I look forward to that coming more into focus. In relation to reimbursements in terms of the project room key costs, does that also involve not full reimbursement from FEMA? In other words, a project that came through the state and then went through the counties, and then now we have Project Room Key in the city of Los Angeles. Can you clarify for me what exactly we're going to be on the hook for in lieu of full reimbursement from FEMA specific to Project Room Key?
So the Project Room Key is somewhat unique in that we did have an allocation of approximately $19 million from the state. We have been using that a little bit to cash flow. It is hoped that that will be sufficient to meet essentially the 25% that is not covered by FEMA, but again, that becomes difficult to fully project when, of course, that project has not rolled out exactly as projected in terms of total numbers of rooms. And then again, the expectation is that the current people in those either hotels or trailers will be there until they are placed into alternate housing, and that could extend beyond the September assumption underlying the number in the chart. I did put in the narrative of the report that it could, you know, I discussed that it could be significantly more, just depending on how quickly we are able to transition those residents into other housing solutions.
Makes sense. So notwithstanding the possible 25% cover that you mentioned to meet our match obligations, there are other unknowns moving into the future, because we obviously don't want to just shut it down and then, you know, displace people who have already been homeless previously.
And I would like to be clear, that is not the intention, even though
Right.
I indicated in my report that a ramp down is in process and expected to potentially be completed. There is no intention of shutting anything down until the person is placed.
Right, and I'm glad you said that, and I was echoing that just for the public consumption, to make sure that folks don't get the idea that we're just going to shut it down. Here's the date, you're out of here. It's not going to be like that. So that's helpful to us too, because we know that we're going to have obligations beyond this this scope and conversation vis-a-vis the match obligation from the city and then the FEMA reimbursement. So I get that. Speaking of rooms, whether it be trailers or hotel rooms or individuals, about how many people are the direct beneficiaries currently of Project Roomkey?
So, council member, in the city of Los Angeles, there are 6 hotels that we are directly contracting. I don't have the number of people, but there are 1,271 rooms under contract with the city. Within the city of Los Angeles, there's an additional 1,011 rooms in the city of Los Angeles, which are contracted under the county. And then we also have an additional 270 trailers that are deployed that we receive from the state that houses 244 individuals.
So what would be helpful, Madam Chair, is to get what Matt just said in a document, maybe in some sort of spreadsheet in terms of availability, so we have a better understanding of what's available and what's occupied, and then what isn't available. So I appreciate that. And then lastly, I look forward to...
Mr. Alfaro, I don't mean to interrupt. Did you mean specifically to Project Roomkey?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, just clarity on Project Roomkey. What I was going to say is, we can also hear these details in the Homelessness and Poverty Committee, which is scheduled to take place next week. So if that's something that could be worked up in time for that, that would be much appreciated.
Can we get that done?
Oh, certainly. Yeah, we could turn that around today.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Price?
Hi, thank you, Madam Chair. And to Patty and Bat, again, thanks for the report. On the facilities, again, I know we're winding down the rec centers activities. So where are those folks going to go? And I guess that's the question. First of all, where are they going?
I believe again that we are working to place those people in housing as one center closes. If there are still people there, they're transitioned to another of the remaining open rec centers until there is an opportunity to put them into an alternate situation.
But the plan is to close down all the rec centers by a certain date?
Councilman, there's not a certain date. We have been engaging in a demobilization, as Patty said, as individuals many of them have gone into Project Roomkey hotel rooms. Others have left on their own accord. It is their choice. We're not forcing anyone to stay. But as we have had vacancies, we've been consolidating the locations. There are currently, of all of the rec centers, there are currently only 4 in operation with a total capacity of 266 beds. And of those 266 beds, there's 147 filled as of today.
And the funding for that program has got to be spent by the end of the year?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
The funding for that portion of the Roomkey program has got to be expended by the end of this year, or is it rollover?
Project Roomkey funds, the state funds, I would have to get back to you. I don't believe that they have to be spent by the end of the year, but I honestly do not recall how quickly they need to be spent.
I'm sorry, I should clarify that. I meant the CARES funding.
The CARES funding does need to be spent by December 31st.
And then finally, you mentioned that we were ramping up in contact tracing. What are we doing exactly, and what kind of ramp up are we planning?
The city has contributed in the neighborhood, I believe, of some 300 or so disaster service workers, which are city employees who then work as contact tracers. They are trained by the county on how to do that. And the city is paying for the time that those employees spend doing that. In general, these are employees who where departments have identified that the work that they do is not essential during the emergency. Many of them are ones who can't necessarily do their regular job in the current situation, and therefore they are doing this instead.
And how much are we allocating for that activity, that tracing activity?
Most of that, I believe, started in the June-July timeframe.
Correct.
How much money are we allocating, or are we budgeting for that activity?
I don't have at my fingertips the amount of reported DSW time for contact tracing. I would have to go back and look at what departments have reported. I don't have that here with me.
If you could provide that, that would be very helpful. Certainly, tracing is an important component in keeping the virus away. And while we haven't been doing much of it, I know it needs to be done. So I'm glad to know that there are some plans to make that happen. Thank you, Madam President.
All right, thank you. If there are no other questions on item 1, I'd like to go ahead and receive and file the CAO's report and instruct the CAO to reserve a total of $200 million from the COVID Relief Fund for Homelessness. So I'd like to go ahead and approve that without objection.
Thank you.
And we'll be having a discussion on the CAO's report on homelessness in the near future. We have to have that conversation. Okay? All right. So without objection, that item passes. Let's go ahead and take up items 2 and 3 together. I believe we have Carolyn Hall, who's the General Manager of EWDD, to discuss the Small Business Grant Program. Is she with us? And I'm going to ask you to read those 2 items into the record while we wait for her. Mr. City Clerk, items 2 and 3.
Certainly, Madam President. Item number 2 is
Hello, can
Let me check.
you hear me?
Those bullets, and it was 23, so.
Can someone mute themselves? Mr. Cedillo, can you mute yourself? Thank you. Let's go ahead and read items 2 and 3 into the record before we ask Ms. Hall to present on the Small Business Grant Program. Go ahead.
Item number 2 is an Economic and Workforce Development Department to report and motion Martinez, Price, O'Farrell relative to the coronavirus relief funds for the Small Business Emergency Loan Program. Item number 3 is an EWDD to report on the Los Angeles Regional Relief and Recovery Fund. This was scheduled pursuant to Council action of June 23, 2020.
Ms. Hall, are you with us?
I am. Can
there
you hear
are.
me?
Good afternoon. Nice to see you. You want to go ahead and give us an overview on the Small Business Grant Program? Why don't you go ahead and kick us off?
Sure, I will. I'm happy to do that. Good afternoon, council members. If you don't mind, could I actually go into the LA Regional COVID Relief and Recovery Fund first, or would you prefer if I discuss the Small Business Emergency Loan Program?
That's fine. Go ahead and
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think it'll come together.
Okay.
So I want to first of all thank the council members for having me. It's a great opportunity to speak to you today. I'm going to speak to you today regarding the expansion of the LA Regional COVID Relief and Recovery Fund, which we're calling the Regional Fund, and the establishment of a COVID-19 Child Care Relief and Recovery Fund. We're recommending transferring up to $20 million in CARES dollars to the Regional Fund to be deployed as grants. We are recommending up to $10 million in CARES funds to be deployed as grants as well, specifically to child care providers directly through EWDD. I'd like to remind the members of the committee that the LA COVID Regional Relief Fund was established as a partnership between the city and the County of Los Angeles, along with philanthropy and other institutions, to provide needed financial support to small businesses and nonprofits throughout the region. The Local Initiative Support Corporation, LISC, was selected as the fund administrator. The Regional Fund was developed to deploy funds in 2 phases, Phase 1 grants and Phase 2 loans. In this discussion, we're only considering and recommending a grant product. While there's demand for loans in the recovery phase, the immediate need is for grants. And the intended source of funds, the CARES dollars, has several requirements that make using it for loans a bit challenging without further direction from the federal government. As we all know, small businesses in Los Angeles are reeling from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and the lack of business activity associated with compliance with the safer at home order. In stable conditions, most small businesses operate under thin profit margins. Grocery stores, nail salons, restaurants, hair salons, and a myriad of other communities serving mom and pop businesses have average profit margins hovering around 2%. As a result, most small businesses don't have cash reserves needed to weather the unforeseen economic catastrophe like a global pandemic. An analysis conducted by the Boston Consulting Group showed that 70% of small businesses with 50 or fewer employees are expected to deplete their cash reserves by the end of this month, August 2020. To compound the effects of the pandemic, recent public demonstrations have resulted in property damage to small businesses throughout the city. Los Angeles' nonprofit community has also been negatively impacted, with most enduring increased demand and declining revenues. And while funds from the federal government through PPP have assisted many in the city of Los Angeles, experience and recent studies have shown that the federal disaster assistance did not help everyone, and many of our small businesses in vulnerable communities were left out. In fact, street vendors and a large portion of our micro entrepreneurs have not been able to access any federal dollars. So this program that we put together, and I'm speaking specifically right now about the $20 million that we are recommending to go into the LA COVID Regional Fund for Small Businesses, is not a first-come, first-served program. Grant winners will be chosen through an online weighted lottery system. And the reason for the lottery system is to support the most vulnerable communities. Therefore, applicants and/or geographic locations that meet our established criteria will be weighted more heavily in our lottery system. These indicators include entities that are located in low and moderate income communities, small businesses and nonprofits with annual gross revenue below $500,000, businesses that are in communities that have a CAL and virus screen health hazard that's 90% or more. And we also have looked at and included a socio data at composite score by city council district that takes in indicators such as poverty rates, educational attainment, median income. The purpose of all of that work is to ensure that the districts with disadvantaged factors will receive a higher lottery weighting. The goal of the program is to allocate funding to micro entrepreneurs, and those are our street vendors, our gig economy, those engaged in the gig economy, sole proprietors, 1099 workers. Really, those people have been left out of the federal government relief program. We're also allocating funds for small businesses, businesses between 100,000 and $1 million in annual gross revenues, nonprofits, medium-sized businesses, and medium-sized nonprofits. Again, the primary objective in the program is to use the CARES dollars in such a way to get funding to those businesses that have been most impacted by COVID-19 in an expeditious manner, which is why we are recommending a grant program, which again will be administered through the LA COVID Regional Fund, which is administered by lists. And before I go on to the child care component of that, I'm wondering if there's any questions that I should take, because that was a lot right there. I want to know if I should field any questions.
Why don't you go ahead and we'll take questions after you're done with your entire presentation. Maybe that's easier.
Okay, that's fine with me.
Why don't you guys go ahead and continue?
Okay, so the second component of using the using CARES dollars to, again, work with our most vulnerable communities and businesses, we're recommending allocating $10 million for the creation of the COVID-19 Child Care Relief and Recovery Fund. And as just a little bit of background on that, during the current crisis, licensed child care provider facilities within Los Angeles have faced a unique set of challenges. Child care enterprises, for-profit and non-profit, were among the hardest hit by the COVID-19 related shutdown, with a third of child care workers nationwide laid off or furloughed. Only the hotel and restaurant industry had fared worse. The precipitous decline in revenues have exacerbated the industry's structural challenges because child care providers operate on such thin margins. As a result, many have shuttered their doors. And furthermore, the Center for American Progress estimates that 51% of all child care providers in California are currently at risk of closing permanently. Statistics show that there are approximately 4,541 licensed child care providers in Los Angeles County, that is, with the vast majority of those being family child care home providers, and about 748 centers. Obviously, some subset of that is within the city of Los Angeles. Because of COVID-19, many of these child care programs, and I think you heard one of the speakers speak to this item, is that they've had to reduce their size of their classrooms, take on additional expenditures to meet the PPE requirements. So the real purpose of the $10 million in the program design is to provide these child care providers with the needed funds so that they can continue to serve our community. And I think maybe I can, and if you want me to now go into the current micro program, or do you again want to stop there and take this item?
No, let's go ahead and start. Why don't you take us through the small business grant program before I take questions?
Okay, so currently we are operating a small business microloan program through the department we are not using CARES dollars for that microloan program. We established that microloan program really at the onset of when the stay-at-home orders had come through, and through that time we have seen an increased demand and an overextension of the program. But as we have gone through the process, we have noticed that really what is needed at the moment is to convert that loan program into a grant program so that we can expedite the funds out the door and make sure that we are again serving our community. Let me give you a few numbers of where we're at with the microloan program. As of earlier this week, we have funded $6.5 million in loans. We have funds remaining of about $4.1 million. The funds that are being used for this program are general fund and other special revenues. It is not part of the CARES Act, and we are recommending that the CARES Act funds be used to supplement or to take out our general fund for this program. The Small Business Microloan Program has received over 25,000 applications, and it is estimated that, again, we've received over 4,810 submitted applications, and at the moment we have about 902 applications that have been approved. And so as you can see, what these programs show is that there is a significant need for additional assistance for small businesses and nonprofits within our community. And thank you. I'll happily take questions.
Okay, Mr. Price?
Thank you, Madam President. And Carolyn, thank you for your hard work. I know you've been working closely with our office and others as you put this program together. I really appreciate it. I think you're right on. We need to be looking at the grants to assist these small and medium-sized businesses, micro businesses, and child care. Talk a little bit about the concern that we've always raised is equity, as you know.
Right.
So talk a little bit more about how this weighted lottery is going to work, how traditionally disadvantaged communities are not going to be left out or the last to get in on this line. But how are we going to compensate? How are we going to take those businesses that have been really left behind into consideration in getting these grants?
Well, thank you for that question. The equity lens is really important to us. I think we've learned through when we stood up our microloan program that the first come, first serve approach is leaves some entities and individuals out because there could be language barriers that challenge them in getting their applications in, and there just may not be the same amount of information in the community. So what we've done through the LA COVID Regional Fund is twofold. I'll talk about the lottery system in a moment, but we also realized that technical assistance is really important. We put money in through philanthropy, and I have to give philanthropy credit for this. We stood up a technical assistant a week or two before we opened the fund, and we got word out on the street through CDFIs, Community Development Financial Institutions, and other nonprofits so that we could get the word out to the community. We coupled that with what we're calling our weighted lottery system. We are giving more weight to those entities or individuals who are in communities that are vulnerable, that have high poverty rates, have challenges with educational attainment, those very entities and organizations that were left out of PPP. So they have a higher probability of getting the grant through the weighted lottery system.
And then what's the well, I see the grant size here, looking at the table 1.
Yeah, the grant sizes right now, and we pretty much finalized those, but our grant sizes are, and I'm just struggling to find it. We tried to separate them out by the size of the organization. So if you're a micro entrepreneur, here it is. If you're a micro entrepreneur, we've allocated a grant size of $5,000. Small businesses are at $15,000. Nonprofits of a certain size are also at $15,000. And as we move up in size with small businesses, you're eligible for $25,000. And what we've noticed with nonprofits is nonprofits have a different structure in their revenue. So we are looking for medium nonprofits to obtain a higher level of grant, but they will not be in a lottery system. We will actually review those nonprofits.
No, I think that's a good approach. I just would ask, Madam Chair, we just sort of track it.
Oh, absolutely.
On a regular basis, so we can kind of see where the money is going, and if in fact it's getting out where we need it to be.
And in fact, that's one of the reasons why we will be tracking it. And we would like to reserve to tweak this a little bit if as we're moving the rounds through, and I should have said, it is not we're just opening it up. We are actually having at least 2 rounds to allow us to kind of look at where it's tracked, who's coming in, and to make adjustments if needed. For the purposes of equity. This is really about getting the equity lens correct.
All right, thank you. Thanks for your efforts.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. O'Farrell?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good to see you again, Ms. Holt.
Hi, thank you. Good to see you.
Just a couple of comments and then just a few quick questions. Colleagues, virtually all of us have really reprioritized in a lot of ways since COVID-19 landed through our rent subsidy program, the $100 million program that we unanimously approved that was based on some of the actions that we individually took in our own districts. One similar action that I took in the 13th district was a $1 million pot of money that I reallocated from and reprioritized, not related to COVID or CARES Act money, but just monies that would have gone toward public infrastructure projects in my district, for example. So we created our own small, a bit of a micro loan, not a micro loan, but a micro grant of $5,000 per business. And that disbursement in our district will probably begin in mid-September. And I want to thank you, Carolyn, for the great work with Daisy on your staff, who signed to us through EWDD to administer this program for us. So we're going to help a couple of hundred small businesses in the 13th with these $5,000 grants. And it's a bit of a guinea pig for, I think, what you're talking about here, which is more robust, and it has more levels, which is really great because it helps micro entrepreneurs, small businesses, nonprofits, and medium small businesses. So that's really great. Mine was much more basic, but it's a start. And I'm really glad to see this roll out. We know that it's been a catastrophe for the small business community in Los Angeles, which is about 3/4 of all workers in the city of Los Angeles. So this couldn't come at a better time. One in the child care piece, fantastic. I think that, do we have a sense yet, Ms. Hull, of how many child care facilities or even the number of families or children that we can expect to receive relief from these recovery funds? Do we have a ballpark idea of that?
Well, first of all, I wanted to thank you for acknowledging Daisy and Jackie, because I have the good sense just to get out the way. And they have done a fantastic job, and I just want to thank you for recognizing the hard work. It was a privilege working with your team. On the child care provision, we have been working with First 5 LA and a few other community development financial institutions that are experts in this field. And just the writing, just to get the report out, we were not able to go through the same sort of rigorous allocation that you see in the small businesses. But on my next report back, or happily do it, in a different setting in the next week or two, we will have that same sort of allocation to talk about. It just was not in a place where I would have felt comfortable yet providing that information.
Very understandable. So you'll probably work with a larger spectrum and universe of child care providers in general, and hopefully cover more families and greater diversity, and with a focus on communities that have been traditionally neglected.
That's right.
To Mr. Price's point. So that's great. Look forward to hearing more about that. The only other question I have is in relation to these programs, these grant programs. When do we imagine getting the registration period off the ground? And then when do we imagine these grants will be dispersed?
Well, going back to the LA COVID Regional Fund, we actually started and opened rounds 1 through 3 using general fund and or special revenue. And we have stood up the LA COVID Regional Fund website. So rounds 1 through 3 have already opened, and we have already dispersed funds from round 1. We put a pause because at the time we stood up the regional fund, we never anticipated the CARES money coming in. So we have now put a pause for round 4, and it is our hope that we will, as we open round 4 at the end of maybe August 31st, instead of having 3.2 million, which is what we were anticipating for phase 1, we will now have a combined minimum of 60 million, and I say that, or 59 million, because it will be up to 20 million from the city, and I believe our county counterparts are putting up to 40 million.
Right. A lot of math, a lot of numbers, but a lot of relief.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Cedillo?
Carolyn, thank you so much. I really appreciate your work. I just want to echo the comments of Senator Price and like Mitchell Farrell. Not all communities are the same, and so therefore, while all children are the same, the challenges of our communities and the critical and strategic responses that the city must come up with are really important at this historic moment. We must create the opportunities for these children to have the child care, recognizing successful programs in the city, programs that have already proven themselves. All of them have made extraordinary commitments and been very responsible in dealing with this, but we need to recognize that there are parts of the city in the Northeast and in the South that have a greater demand. If there's ever going to be an opportunity for these parents to get into the workforce, many of them are essential workers, we've got to be able to make sure that they can place their kids in environments that we already know that have proven to be successful. Joy Picus, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
It's important that we acknowledge that, and as you said, a weighted review is critical to really being responsive to the city, because it's not the same throughout this. And so we have to recognize that, and make sure we place the resources, limited as they are, in the most critical areas. Thank you. Thank you.
Caroline, thank you very much. I just wish that Twitter would be blowing up when it comes to childcare issues and what women have got to face with this pandemic and having to take care of our children. But unfortunately, that's not the world we live in. Twitter is not blowing up on this issue, and I'm not getting bombarded with phone calls and emails about how we're going to take care of our kids. It's unfortunate to me, but I'm glad that we were able to work together on this, because so many of our families are feeling overwhelmed, anxious, abandoned, and the majority of folks don't have in-person help educating or taking care of our children, whether it be a relative, a neighbor, or nannies. So many of us just don't have that ability, particularly women of color who are essential workers and have to choose between taking care of their children or going back to work, or if they're even working remotely, they're having to figure out how to educate their kids at home. So this is a real issue, especially for working families. So I appreciate all the work that you've done with this, with our office. We've got to elevate this issue and make it front and center of everything we're trying to do to deal with working families and how we're going to be able to assist them. So I appreciate you very much. My last question on the business piece is, what are we doing to make sure that our program is targeting women-owned and minority small businesses who were left out of the PPP loan program?
This is a really great question, and one of the items that we thought about in how we structured the program to begin with. LIS, which is our fund administrator, is committed to all those to making sure that we have boots on the ground in those communities to pull in women and minority-owned businesses. So in order for us to make sure that we had that pool, through our philanthropic partners, we actually have received funding for technical assistance to go out in those communities to work directly with those businesses, women-owned, minority, and the New Economics for Women is actually one of the technical advisors that we have as part of our team. So it is something that we are working with all of our business source centers and all of our technical advisors to actually go out of their way and to market. And we have a targeted marketing campaign through our business source centers and through our technical advisors to bring in those categories.
Very well. Well, thank you for that. So seeing no more questions on these two items, I'd like to receive and file item number 2. And then, Carolyn, can you also please read your recommendations for item number 3 into the record?
Absolutely. There are several of them. So let me start with number 1. We authorize the use of a total of $30 million of CARES Act funds as follows. LA Regional COVID-19 Relief and Recovery Fund, $19 million. COVID-19 Child Care Relief and Recovery Fund, $10 million. Program cost, $1 million, for a total of $30 million. Item number 2, authorize the use of up to 10% of the $20 million for the LA Regional COVID Relief and Recovery Fund allocated to LISC LA for program management fees. Authorize the use of $1 million to support program costs and third-party consultant for the LA Regional COVID-19 Relief and Recovery Fund and the COVID-19 Child Care and Relief and Recovery Fund. Authorize the general manager, EWDD, or designee to negotiate and execute agreements with Avivar Capital, LLC, and the Los Angeles Development Fund to provide development and support services for up to $100,000 each for the period of August 19, 2020 through December 31st, 2020. Number 5, authorize EWDD or designee to execute subrecipient agreements and or amendments with Local Initiative Support Corporation, LISC, who is the administrative agent for the Los Angeles Regional COVID-19 Relief and Recovery Fund, subject to the approval of the city attorney as to form. Authorize the controller to establish a new interest-generating fund titled CARES Act Project Fund number, the number is left blank, to be administered by EWDD. Item number 7, authorize the controller to A, increased appropriations totaling $30 million within CAO Department number 10, COVID-19 Federal Relief Fund number 63M, in an account number to be determined, entitled EWDD CRF Projects. B, under 7, transfer $30 million from the EWDD CRF Projects account number to be determined within CAO Department number 10, COVID-19 Federal Relief Fund number 63M, to the newly established CARES Act Project Fund number to be determined. Establish new account, item number C under 7, establish new accounts within the newly established CARES Act Project Fund number to be determined and appropriated as follows. Account name, LA COVID-19 Regional Relief and Recovery Fund, $20 million. COVID-19 Child Care Relief and Recovery Fund, $10 million, for a total of $30 million. Item number, letter D, under 7, transfer up to $20 million from the newly established CARES Act Project Fund number to be determined, account number 22T595, LA COVID-19 Regional Relief and Recovery Fund, to list LA upon presentation of proper documentation by EWDD. Item number 8, instruct EWDD to report on program status of COVID-19 Child Care Relief and Recovery Fund to council and mayor every 45 days or more often as necessary. And final one is item number 9, authorize the general manager or designee of the Economic and Workforce Development Department to make technical corrections to transactions including in this report, subject to the approval of the CAO to implement mayor council intentions as necessary, and authorize the controller to implement those instructions. That was a mouthful.
Appreciate you. Members, I'd like to approve the recommendations in the EWDD report for item number 3 with one change. I'd like to increase the amount for the LA Regional COVID-19 Relief Fund and Recovery Fund to $40 million. That would mean a total of $40 million to the LA Regional Fund and $10 million for the Child Care Fund, for a total of $50 million for small businesses and nonprofit assistance.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Price. So without objection, that will be the order.
Would you like me to call the roll, ma'am?
I just also wanted to state, I know that we had several callers concerned about street vendors and how we were going to address some of their needs. So I just want to make sure that they know that we're specifically setting aside money for micro entrepreneurs like them in the Small Business Grant Program. So after today's action, this committee has allocated about $4 million that will be set aside from micro entrepreneurs. And so that would give street vendors, for example, the ability to apply for $5,000 grants to invest in their own businesses. So I know there was some concern about motions will be agendized in this committee, but I just wanted to make sure that street vendors and their needs were also going to be getting addressed through this small business grant program. I just want to make sure everybody understands that. All right, let's move on to item number 4. Item number 4 is, we have 2 reports. So one is from Recreation and Parks on an alternative learning program, and another is a CLA report on creating a child care voucher program. So why don't we start with the Rec and Parks proposal. I don't know if Mike Scholl is on yet. There he is. Our general manager, he will give us a brief overview on the report and answer any questions that we might have. We're waiting for Mike Scholl to get on. Give us just 1 second. We're adding Mike Scholl. Hey, Al Cortez.
Hi.
How are you, my friend?
Very good.
On an alternative learning program, and another is a CLA report.
Doing wonderful. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm just happy to be alive.
Hey, I love waking up in the morning.
Yes, just
Madam Chair, would you like me to read item 4 into the record?
Why don't you go ahead and do that before we ask Mike Scholl to walk us through the proposal. So go ahead and read that item into the record, item number 4.
Item number 4 is Department of Recreation and Parks report and CLA 2 report on strategies as well as resources such as CARES Act CRF funding for supporting the childcare industry during and after the COVID-19 recovery. This was scheduled pursuant to Council Action of July 1, 2020.
Okay, let's go ahead. Is Mike on yet?
Yes, I'm here, Councilmember.
Hello, you want to go ahead, Mike, and walk us through the Rec and Parks proposal?
Certainly, and good afternoon. This is Mike Scholl, General Manager for the Department of Recreation and Parks. So I'll just start by saying that the department, from the beginning of COVID, when COVID-19, the pandemic started, we knew and realized that childcare, that our role was going to play a major role in the childcare for many of our essential workers, as well as many of the families, for many inequities, resulting from COVID, for parents not being able to work, for kids not being able to attend school. And obviously got heavily involved with sheltering our most vulnerable population as well. We have done several programs to date, starting with childcare for our first responders. We just finished up a very robust summer day camp program for more than 8,500 registered kids across the city. And then as we began to look at schools and look at how we could be effective in helping the school district and helping many of our families certainly under an equity lens of those families that don't have access maybe to internet or parents aren't able to work because they have to be home with their children, but really looking at communities around the city and our rec centers. We have so many rec centers in the city of LA that could be used to help in that effort that aren't really currently being used at all for anything right now. So we began to look at our rec centers, particularly in low-income neighborhoods, and we identified initially 50 rec centers, which are included in the report. Those rec centers, we had to evaluate them for functioning mechanical systems, HVAC. We had the electrical systems because we're going to have to be powering up quite a bit of equipment and things like that. So we narrowed it down to these 50 based on what we felt that we could do in communities where we felt we could be of the most help, and for those communities who are probably in the areas that many of these inequities that we've been talking about, and certainly what the council members have been talking about through this meeting, and evaluated all those rec centers. So the idea of the program is that we would open up 50 rec centers. We have done and performed a layout of the rec centers where we can safely socially distance the kids with workstations inside of the rec center, putting in 2 cohorts of 12 kids. So because of social distancing and the requirements by county health, we felt the gymnasiums could only truly hold about 24 kids. And we also had to evaluate those same rec centers for IT, for Wi-Fi, and I just want to I know Ted's on the call, and I want to recognize Ted Ross and his staff for just doing an incredible help to us, and how quickly they responded to helping us get and perform or get ready to place Wi-Fi at these 50 rec centers should the City Council approve this report. So we feel that we have the technology and we have the physical resources. So the next step was coordinating with LUSD on how we get and make sure that we're helping the most vulnerable kids in the city. Those kids that may be even homeless, or foster care kids, or kids that don't have the right technology or are unable. There still is a considerable digital divide in many of those communities. So we feel like we've got a path for which we can make the biggest difference partnering with LUSD. And I want to thank Al and his team. We've had several meetings, and they've been great to work with. So we've created this program that will begin at 8 in the morning and would last till 7 o'clock at night. And we would, Rec and Parks would fully staff it. We're not trying to be teachers. We don't intend to be teachers, but we do intend to provide much needed recreation and much needed supervision for parents who may have to go to work. and for kids who need the technology. So they will be able to come to the rec center and sign in at 8 o'clock, 8 a.m. in the morning, and begin their online schooling throughout the day until 3 o'clock, at which time at 3 o'clock we would transition those kids and probably additional kids into an after-school program to where we would provide additional recreation activities until 7 p.m. at night. So, there is a possibility that a child may be at a rec center from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. They don't need to be, but there is that option for them. We will be, obviously we've had quite a bit of experience with COVID, and training our staff and, working the shelters that we've worked and working the summer camps and working the first responder day camps. We've got a significant amount of training and knowledge, to help, making sure that we're keeping these kids as safe as we can possibly make them. We will be assigning our lifeguard staff, because most of our pools, or all of our pools, are not open. We've assigned 2 lifeguard staff at each facility who would be there for first aid, as well as do the initial screenings when the kids come in the morning and do screenings throughout the day. We've also set up testing for our own staff, that they will be tested on a weekly basis, just to ensure that we're keeping up and tracking, anything that could spike. That worked very well for us during the summer, where on occasion you do find somebody that tests positives and you're able to isolate them very quickly. So I'll stop there. I think they're well distributed around the city. The list is attached in the report. We do feel that we can be very effective in this effort, and it's something that's extraordinarily needed right now in the city. And I know Al and his team is taking on another grouping of kids themselves in coordination with LAUSD. We're looking at mostly servicing middle school kids, but we'll be flexible with siblings and things like that, however we need to be, or we'll even be flexible around, and evaluate on a case-by-case basis special needs kids. We want to be helpful, and our staff are more than willing and able to perform this. So we're happy to be here and report this to you today, and I'll turn it back over to you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Sho. Members, are there any questions of Mr. Sho regarding this report? Oh, Mr. Price, go ahead.
Madam Chair, thank you again. I just want to thank Ted and Mike for their unique collaboration. This is an exciting opportunity to provide services, especially in underserved areas. As we've talked about, kids don't have hardware, kids who don't have access, and this tries to meet them where they are. We know there will be hardware available from the schools. Students are going to be issued laptops. Do we have any plans for backup laptops in case kids don't have one or won't bring one or need one? Or how are we going to meet that technical need for these students as they come to our centers?
Well, we have two ways. First, working with your office, Councilmember Price, and we've been coordinating with, I believe you have some tablets that you're going to be dispersing to rec and parks to assist in your district with kids that may, or if a device breaks, or if they forget it, or for whatever reason, we would have backup. We're also working with our Parks Foundation to purchase a certain amount of tablets so that we can provide, mainly backups, because LAUSD is providing them with the technology. So they would be mainly backups. But those would be the 2 options of how we're looking at making sure we have backups.
Program going to start? When will the program start, ideally? After approved by council, then when?
It'll take us approximately a couple weeks. So we're looking at a start date of August 31st.
Okay, great. Thanks to you both.
You're welcome. And that said, I should just add, the setup includes, we have to set up tables and chairs, of course, at 50 rec centers. It's about 1,200 or so tables and chairs, and the gym floors will be covered. We have to put a physical barrier down the middle of the gymnasium. That we'll be ordering tarps and a means of holding those tarps up to create a barrier between the 2 cohorts of 12. TED, of course, and ITA needs to complete their work with installing the Wi-Fi and getting the service up and running. But we figured that would take us a maximum of 2 weeks to be ready.
Okay.
All right. right, thanks. It's great to see you, Al. I just wanted to get your take on all this. I know that we've been working with LAUSD. We're collaborating on how to launch this. Is there anything you want to add? It's great to see you. You need to unmute yourself, my friend.
I apologize.
There you go.
No, thank you. No, it's great to be here, and always it's a pleasure working with the city. One of the things that Mike forgot is that, yeah, we as the district, since we're running our grab-and-go food distribution sites, which we've served over 53 million meals, we'll be providing the meals for the youngsters at the rec centers as well. So it'll be provided 2 meals a day in addition to their devices.
Great. Ted, how much time does ITA need for the internet connection? Do you have a timeline? How is it going?
Absolutely. So once we have the authorization, we have about 2 weeks. So we've already started an initial list of about 18 sites, so we can hit that August 31st timeline that Mike described.
Okay, great. So we're still looking towards the end of August to launch all sites. Is that correct, Mr. Scholl?
Yes, all 50 sites, and will be up and running by August 31st.
All right, Mr. O'Farrell?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, everyone, for this wonderful program. A question about the vouchers. Is it one voucher per family for all the school-aged children in that family, or is it one voucher per child?
Well, let's hold off to your question because Mr. Espinosa, there's 2 reports in item number 4. We haven't gone to the CLA child care voucher report yet. So let's go ahead. If there's no other questions of Mr. Schultz in this and the Rec and Parks proposal, I want to go ahead and approve the Rec and Parks report and recommendations without objection.
Yeah,
okay,
sounds
that will
good.
be
Thank
the
you.
order. Now let's go ahead and hear from Mr. Espinosa, who's going to give us the CLA report regarding the child voucher program. So why don't you go ahead, Mr. Espinosa? Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Chris Espinosa, Office of the Chief Legislative Analyst. Before you is a CLA report relative to the child care voucher program. And this is pursuant to a May 6, 2020 approved motion by the council, by council members Martinez and Wesson, to address the impact of COVID-19 on working families and child care. As you've stated during this meeting, the impact of child care services and the importance of it, especially to working families and people, Angelinos getting back to work, is essential. And so our report is recommending a $10 million allocation to the Housing and Community Investment Department, and they would get into a contract with the Child Care Alliance. Now, the Child Care Alliance is a network of Los Angeles County resource, referral, and alternative payment agencies. And this program would mirror the County of Los Angeles. They have a child care voucher program that they're implementing with $15 million coronavirus relief fund allocation. We've also reached out to the county's Advancement of Early Care and Education, First 5 LA, and others to make sure that we are trying to make this process as efficient and fluid as possible. The types of child care facilities that are accepted would be a child care center, a licensed before and after school program, a licensed family daycare home or relative. The Child Care Alliance will report to HCID on a regular basis on the progress of their voucher distribution and any challenges, including contract monitoring to ensure that proper federal reporting requirements are met and that the funds are spent in a timely manner. In general, the overview, the allocation would provide approximately 3,300 children of low-income families and essential workers with 3 months of care. So that we would hope to start the program by September 1st and end by December 30th. Families must meet criteria to be eligible, that the parents would express the need for child care to perform their work, and they would self-certify their working conditions so that that we can expeditiously approve vouchers. Many of the essential workers, as you've heard, are also in the low-income categories, but then there are also priority issues having to do with children who are in child protective services or are in foster care. So they would also receive, highlighted assistance through this program. What we have is the Child Care Alliance will work with a number of subcontractors or agencies that they work with that have been established. And those 7 agencies are working in the city of Los Angeles, and those are Pathways LA, Mexican American Opportunity Foundation, Crystal Stairs Inc., Connections for Children, Child Care Resource Center, Drew Child Development Corporation, and the International Institute of Los Angeles. They're all geographically dispersed throughout the city, and so we hope that they will be able to serve as many people as possible. And so we just wanted to make note that we're trying to move this program forward quickly. December 30th is coming up, and so we're trying to make sure and have a contract authorized very soon. Thank you.
Let's go ahead and take Mr. O'Farrell's question. You want to repeat that, Mr. O'Farrell?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to see you, Mr. Espinosa. Just a clarification about the vouchers. It's probably not an issue at all. Just want to get an understanding. Is it one voucher per family for all of the children within that family, or is it one voucher per child? In other words, to your point of making life as easy as we possibly can for an entire family, as opposed to just some of the children and the parents who are essential workers.
Yes, it would address the family size. So if they have multiple children, they would be cared for.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mr. Espinosa, I just have one question for you. How long will it take to execute the contract with the Child Care Alliance? How long is that going to take?
We hope to get that through once it's approved by council within the following week. So our goal is to get it done before August 30th because we want to launch the program by September 1st.
Okay, and I just want to make sure that folks understand that the city funding will only be reserved for city residents. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's for city residents.
Yeah, okay.
Essential workers and low-income families.
Right, very well. Thank you, Mr. Espinosa. Well, members, if there are no other questions, the CLA report and their recommendations are approved without objection. Okay, thank you very much. Now let's take the last 2 items are on our agenda. Mr. City Clerk, can you go ahead and read items 5 and 6? We will be taking those together. While you do that, I'm going to ask that we led Abigail Marquez, the Assistant General Manager of HCID, into our meeting so she can provide us with a brief overview. Go ahead and read those 2 items into the record, please.
Item number 5 is the Los Angeles Housing and Community Investment Department report relative to the Community Services Block Grant CARES Act Revolving Loan Program and Credit Counseling Program. Item number 6 is an HCID LA report relative to the actions taken to provide increased protections for victims of domestic violence, including undocumented immigrants during the Safer at Home order.
Do you have Ms. Marquez on I was going to say on the line, but do we have her on the Zoom? Oh, she looks like she dropped out. Let's see if we can get her back in. She's one of those moms that's probably doing daycare and teaching both her girls. Abby, can you hear us? Are you there? Oh, we're trying to connect. Okay. There she is. Hello, welcome. Ms. Marquez, you want to go ahead and provide us with a brief overview of items 5 and 6?
Yes, I can. I'm happy to. Thank you, Madam President. I think that I'm hearing an echo, so I'm not sure if you're hearing me okay. I am joined this afternoon by my colleague, our Director of Operations, Veronica McDonald, who will also give us an overview of one of the 2 reports that we have before you this afternoon. Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Okay, great. I do have two reports. We do have two reports before you today. Yes. Can you hear me okay, Madam President?
Yep, we can hear you. Everything's good. I think the echo's coming from your end because we don't hear an echo here.
Okay, I'm hearing a recording of what I just shared.
Okay, turn off any recordings you might have. Are you guys listening to the meeting on another computer or another device? Maybe if you turn that down. That usually helps with the echo.
I apologize. I've done this before, and I'm not sure if there's something that's off. Is that better?
We don't hear any echo.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to get started. I apologize. The first report that we have before you is a report that is requesting to allocate Community Services Block Grant funding, which is supplemental funding from the California State Department. Let me, give me 1 second, I apologize.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think that's it. I'm ready. I apologize. I was logged in on two different screens.
It's okay.
We are all still adjusting to this new technology. Thank you again for the opportunity to present before you two reports. That the first is to allocate funding from the Community Services Block Grant, the CARES Act, the supplemental funding that the city has been allocated through the State Department of Community Services and Development. The report is also responding to several council motions that were introduced. One by you, Madam President, other motions introduced by Councilmember Bloomingfield. And we shared a little bit of this work at the Homelessness and Poverty Committee that Councilmember Mitchell Farrell chaired a few weeks ago. And this is utilizing the Community Services Block Grant funding to be able to respond to families who were, prior to the pandemic, were already living check to check and were struggling financially. And because of this pandemic, have been much more financially strapped, if you will. They've been laid off or furloughed, and have some have been able to access some of the federal stimulus resources. We are doing everything that we can to activate all of our family source centers, and we also want to allocate some funding for our domestic violence and human trafficking shelter agencies that are currently supported by the CSBG grant. I do have my colleague Veronica McDonald on the line who's going to walk us through the program components for the CSBG funding, and then I will walk through the report that is before you with respect to our response to how to support survivors of domestic violence during this crisis. Veronica, are you on?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Veronica McDonald, and I am the Director of Program Operations here at the Housing and Community Investment Department. And thank you for allowing me to speak today. We are requesting approval to utilize our CSBG CARES Act supplemental funding to respond to the economic crisis that Abigail had talked a little bit about. By using our procured system of family source, domestic violence, and human trafficking shelter operations to address the current gap in resources that exist. This includes working with EWGD to educate and empower our most vulnerable Angelenos on the use of various financial aid programs like the economic impact payments, unemployment benefits, the pandemic unemployment insurance benefits, and the earned income tax credit. Also, the funds will be used to connect families to a CARES counselor who will work with families in developing a plan to help them economically recover through the pandemic through credit counseling, debt relief and negotiation tactics, and loan products to help bridge financial emergencies. Helping survivors find shelter is another aspect that the CSBG CARES Act will fund, along with enhancing our domestic violence shelter and human trafficking shelter operations by extending remote services and support. We will also expand access to emergency services such as food to address the heightened increase in food insecurity because of COVID, and providing virtual learning opportunities for students to support their classroom instruction. And so those were the primary areas where we will use the CSBG CARES supplemental funding.
We just want to take a moment to also acknowledge the hard work of our service providers who have been on the front line from day one. They have not shut down their agencies. They've been open 5 days a week, sometimes even more than that. They've seen a tremendous growth in the number of families that are seeking services. Our food pantry programs have gone from serving 200 families a week when the pandemic started to serving anywhere from 800 to 900 on a single day. So the challenges that they're facing are enormous, and the response has been really remarkable. So I just really want to thank our providers through the Family Source system and the domestic violence and human trafficking system who have really stepped up and have been providing support to some of our most vulnerable families and households across the city.
Very well pointed. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Ms. Marquez. We have to absolutely thank our providers for stepping up. Essential workers, again, providing for the neediest among us. So I appreciate your words. Members, are there any questions on items 5 and 6?
Madam President, I will talk just a little bit about the second report that's before you, and that is a response to your motion, Madam President, along with support from Councilmember Cedillo and Councilmember Price. That was requesting a report from the Housing and Community Investment Department on how we were supporting domestic violence survivors during this crisis. As you all know, our department also supports the domestic violence and human trafficking shelter agencies that are funded by the city, and they are funded by a combination of both federal and local general fund resources. We heard some testimony from some of our providers during public comment earlier today. The challenges that domestic violence and human trafficking survivors are experiencing due to this pandemic are unique and unprecedented, and I would say that they are among the most vulnerable. We have heard from our providers that are responding to the DV hotline calls as an example. They're responding in this short window of 4 months. They've responded to close to 30,000 calls that are DV-related calls. LAPD has reported close to 17,000 related domestic violence incidents that they've had to respond to. Our shelter agencies were at capacity, which is why the mayor's office and the mayor and the mayor's fund for Los Angeles created Project Safe Haven, which is a program that was seeking to house survivors who were not able to be accommodated in shelter, both for capacity reasons and also to reduce the spread of the coronavirus. They were being placed in hotels and motels, so very similar to Project Roomkey, but it was a very specific program designed for domestic violence and human trafficking survivors that is currently housing over 1,200 survivors. Many of them are mothers with single mothers with children who were actively fleeing violence. And again, the domestic violence and human trafficking, the experiences for this population is magnified because of COVID. And they have been enduring both physical, emotional, and financial abuse to a level that we've never seen before. So we urge this council to continue to support the Project Safe Haven program that will transition from the Mayor's Fund for Los Angeles to the Housing and Community Investment Department. We will manage both the execution of the agreements with the 11 service provider agencies that have been identified, and we will also work with the city attorney to negotiate and execute agreements with the 5 hotels and motels that are part of Project Safe Haven.
Okay, members, I'm just going to start with Mr. Cedillo.
Fingers. Madam Chair, thank you. Abigail, thank you so much. Thank the mayor for his leadership on this matter. As President said earlier today, not a lot of tweeting for all the great work that's been going on during this crisis. And so I want to thank you and your team for your leadership. I'm interested, back to the other previous matter. You mentioned the Earned Income Tax Credit, and it's a very, very important program for low-income people. It's essentially free money.
Right.
And so please tell me about that program and how we're going to be able to get that money into the hands of the people who will use it best and who need it most.
Yes, thank you, Council Member. That's a great question. And we here at HSID have been actively promoting the Earned Income Tax Credit for a number of years. We have both the Earned Income Tax Credit, the Child Tax Credit. Now there's a California Earned Income Tax Credit. So we offer through the network of family source centers, we offer free tax preparation services. Last year, we helped connect our families that we work with to over 10 million in tax credits, that this is their hard-earned money. Oftentimes they're leaving these resources on the table because they don't realize that it's available or don't know where to go for free tax preparation services. We are, because there is now the economic impact payment and that deadline is extended to October 15th, people also don't realize that they can file prior year returns up until October 15th. So we are promoting these services very aggressively through our family source system. We have a campaign that we refer to as Free Tax Prep LA that is now being augmented or supported by another campaign that we're going to be funding with CSBG marketing dollars that we're referring to as LA Connected. And it's an initiative in partnership with the Economic and Workforce Development Department to help families claim unemployment insurance benefits, apply for these tax credits such as the EITC, and apply for their economic impact payment.
Okay, thank you very much. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you and your team for your efforts, particularly around this program.
Thank
and
you.
then, of course, obviously, all of us thank you for your work on behalf of women fleeing domestic abuse. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I just have one brief question. So what's the plan for this Project Safe Haven after December? We need to start thinking about that now because this funding's going to run out and it's really unclear whether we're going to get more funding from the federal government. So what is the plan after December?
That's a great question. Thank you, Council President, for that question. So essentially what we're doing with the funding, with the CRF funding, is we're going to continue to house them so that we don't displace people between September through December 30th. What we will do is we will leverage the infrastructure that we have developed through the Domestic Violence and Human Trafficking Shelter. The report before you, the CSBG report, is also allocating funding to the Domestic Violence and Human Trafficking Shelter agencies, and the funding will be available through 2022. So our plan will be to transition the survivors that are currently housed at the hotels and motels to be supported through a longer-term strategy by the existing shelter agencies that we contract with. And we will leverage the additional CARES Act funding through the CSBG program to continue to support them.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Members, are there any other questions? Okay, thank you. I'd like to go ahead and approve the HSID report and the recommendations. But I know the CAO has a technical amendment to item number 5, so if you can go ahead and read that into the record before I move on this item.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, Madam President and council members. Aurora Brasi with the CAO's office. The technical changes to HSID's transmittal are as follows. Delete recommendations 2B and 2C and replace with the following. B, approve the use of CSBG CARES Act supplemental funds for the Family Source Center system and domestic violence human trafficking shelter contracts for the period August 1st, 2020 through May 31st, 2022 as follows. Program costs, Family Source Center systems from 8/1/2020 to 5/31/2022, $5,082,080. Family Source Center subcontracts, August 1st, 2020 through 6/30/2021, $200,004. Domestic violence human trafficking system from August 1st, 2020 to 5/31/2022, $1,103,280. The total is $9,194,002. C, authorize the general manager of HSID or designee to execute new agreements with the 16 Family Source Center system contractors for a total of $5,082,080 and with the 10 domestic violence human trafficking shelter contractors for a total of $2,808,638 starting on or about August 1st, 2020 through May 31st, 2022 for the attached CSPG CARES Act supplemental funding budget, subject to the review and approval of the city attorney as to form and legality and compliance with the city's contracting requirements. Next is delete recommendations 2E and 2F and replace with the following. E, authorize by resolution the employment of one exempt senior project coordinator, classification code 1538, within the HSID to implement the enhanced CARES program services for the period August 19, 2020 through June 30, 2021, subject to allocation by the Board of Civil Service Commissioners and exemption in accordance with Charter Section 1001 D4 based on the position being grant funded for a term of no more than 2 years, which may be extended for 1 additional year for a maximum exemption period of 3 years. And F, authorize the controller to, 1, record a receivable from the CSD in the amount of $9,194,002 within the Community Services Block Grant Fund, number 428, and 2, establish new accounts and appropriate funds within Community Services Block Grant Fund number 428/43 as follows. Account 43T908, the CARES nonprofit name, in the amount of $8,090,722, and then account 43T501, CARES Administrative Reserve, in the amount of $1,103,280, for a total revised amount of $9,194,200. And that concludes the amended language. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to go ahead and approve both HSID reports and the recommendations as amended without objection. Okay, that will be the order. Members, I just wanted to thank you for your patience. I know there was a long meeting this afternoon, and we have well over 3 dozen pending motions that are related to this committee. So I'm just going to ask for your patience as we move through those. We had some pretty big reports that we were working on in July in preparation for today's meeting. So again, I appreciate your patience. There's no other business before us. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.